Hi there, my name is Mihai Ionescu and I'm a developer advocate at Google working on the Google Wallet team. Today I'll cover two APIs, the Digital Goods API and the Instant Buy API, and we'll look at various ways to integrate them into your applications or online store. First, what is Google Wallet? Conceptually, Google Wallet is an effort to digitize all the physical information available in your wallet, stuff like credit cards, coupons, loyalty cards, could even be movie tickets, airline tickets, and take all that information in digital form and put it into the cloud. The benefit of having it into the cloud is that it will be available anywhere on any device. So that is a very powerful concept. Once a customer has access to that information anywhere and on any device, then the online purchasing experience, for example, can be dramatically improved. And with an improved experience, you'll see a dramatic rise in conversion rates and sales. So that is all great news for merchants and developers who doesn't want to make more money. And that is where the two Google Wallet APIs I'm going to talk about are focusing on. So let's start with the Digital Goods API. The Digital Goods API is the simpler of the two, but a lot of the principles and concepts apply to both of them. So I'll make sure if there's something completely different, I will point it out. So what is the Digital Goods API? Well, it's a buy flow that is optimized for digital content. And that means that you won't have to worry about implementing your own buy flow with a risk engine or having PCI compliance. The entire API should be very simple to integrate and let you focus on your core competency in developing your game or your online store. So I pointed out some of the principles behind our APIs and I want to emphasize them now. One of them is to build a very streamlined experience for the customer. And we've noticed that the more you optimize the number of clicks and you reduce the number of clicks, the higher the conversion rates are. People will tend to finish a purchase if you make it simple for them, if you don't take them to different websites and make them click a lot of buttons. So both the Digital Goods API and the Instant Buy API are following these principles, and they are trying to keep the customer engaged either in the game or stay on your store and complete the transaction in as fewer steps as possible. One of the second principles was to make it that simple. The integration should be as easy as adapting, copy-pasting one of our samples and making just a few modifications on your site and being ready to place a transaction. And here I have a very simple snippet from the Digital Goods API, which is not that different than a final version. You could literally use some of the snippets in this presentation later on and have a functional, working payment system. And another important principle was to keep it affordable. And in the Digital Goods API, the pricing structure is one of the most aggressive in the industry, with fees as low as 1.9%. The Instant Buy API, on the other hand, it's absolutely free, and you will see why later in the talk. Let's have a quick look at the Instant Buy API. So why is it different than the Digital Goods API? Well, it offers you more control over the buy flow. The Digital Goods API had the simplest buy flow possible. All you had to do was add the Buy with Google button to your page, and once the customer clicked on the button, you knew you would get your money. There was nothing else for you to do than acknowledge that you received the money. The Instant Buy API goes a step further, and for merchants who have a more complex in-house inventory management system or purchasing system, allows them to use their own payment processors. So it will provide you with a virtual one-time card, with a proxy card that can be used only for that particular purchase. And then you will charge the card and do all the necessary post-transaction processings in-house, and thus giving you more control over managing your entire post-processing system. Similarly, as the Digital Goods API, we strive to provide a very streamlined customer experience. So the buy flow should be frictionless. And in this case, it's just 2 clicks to complete an order. Put the item in your shopping cart, then select to buy with Google. Then you would confirm the order, and we provide the merchant with shipping information and the virtual card information. And then with an extra click, you complete the order. Now let's have a look at how we integrate the Digital Goods API and the Instant Buy API. And let's start with the Digital Goods API, the simpler of the two. An important concept that is applicable to both APIs is the JSON Web Token, short format JWT, or it's pronounced JWT. And what is a JWT? It's a compact representation of a message. It's a very nice way to communicate between your application and Google server and transfer payment information back and forth. And how does a JSON Web Token look like? Well, it starts with a JSON data structure, like we see here on the left side. And then it URL encodes it and cryptographically signs the JSON structure. And you end up with a string of weird looking characters like here. But conceptually, the JWT is composed of a header, the content that we see here, and the signature. And the signature, you use it along the way to verify that the information you receive matches the origin. So only you know the secret that you use to sign the JSON content, and then at the origin you verify that it has not been tampered with along the way. I can show you briefly one of our tools. If on our developer site we have a JWT decoder, you can use it to decode any kind of JWT, valid JWT. I have some random JWT here. If you click on the decode button, you will see that it nicely shows you the header, the content, and the signature. The header contains just some information about the algorithm used to encode it, and then the content or the claims is the usual JSON structure. And then the signature is what you will later use to verify that your JWT has been signed with the correct secret. We'll come back to this one later. Let's see how a single order JWT looks like for a digital goods order. So in this example, you see a very nice JSON with a lot of fields, stuff like who is the merchant, the type of payment, in this case is just a single item that you will sell. We have fields such as issued at and an expiry time for the JWT, and then a request structure with all the item information, in this case name, description, price, and currency. The API is available in 18 countries and in 9 currencies. So this field, the currency code, could be anything other than USD. And we had an extra field here, a seller data, which is quite important. You can place in this field any information, any merchant information that you could later use to identify the transaction, either a user ID or a timestamp, And all this information will be later mirrored back to you when the transaction is over. So you know exactly what happened when the transaction was placed, under what circumstances. So all this JSON information, as you see it here, we'll pass it to an encode function. There are a lot of JWT libraries out there that can encode and decode JSON web tokens, and we'll sign it with a seller secret. You will get a seller secret when you sign up for a merchant account, and keep that seller secret in a safe place, literally on your server, because it's used to verify that the information is correct and you don't want someone else to tamper with your transaction data. Let's have a look at another type of JWT. In this case, it's a subscription JWT, and I highlighted some of the fields that are different. It's a little bit bigger, but not that much bigger. So what changed was the type of transaction in the JWT, and then we added an extra structure called recurrence, which specifies how often the subscription should recur and at what price. So you see the JSON structure is maintained, and the encoding takes place. There's the same strategy to encode the JSON. As I mentioned earlier, you could literally copy-paste this code, and with very few modification, you'll be able to have a working digital payment system on your website. It's that simple. So once you have created the JWTs and encoded them on your server, then you're ready to send a transaction to Google. And that is one of the simplest way I have ever seen to send a transaction information over. So this API, it's basically just one function call. It doesn't get any simpler than that. And the function call is google.payments.inapp.buy. And to this function, you will pass your generated JWT that we've seen earlier, and two handlers, one for success, one for failure, that will be called on your client when the transaction is over. And you link this handler with a button. Once the button is pressed, then the transaction information would be sent over to Google. And let's have a look at how this would actually work in practice. So first, on our developer side, we have a nice demo, nice way for you to play with various JSON web tokens. Then this form here, it's editable, and let's say we want to change the item price to $30 from $20, and if you click on generate, you will notice that on the right side the JSON here will change slightly. See, it changed, something changed here because we have a different field now. So this is literally the entire code that you could copy paste and put on your website to add a Buy with Google digital goods button. The button is here, and it calls this function here, which in turn calls payments.inapp.buy and passes it the JSON web token and two handlers. So let's try this in practice. So a simple code like this on a very simple web page. So on our developer side, we also have a nice list of samples that you could use as starting point for your implementation. And let's try a purchase that is a very simple digital purchase. I click the buy button, and the dialog shows up. I can change my payment information if I want to, but generally everything it's all set up. I can just click buy. My JSON, my encoded JWT now goes to Google. Google processes a transaction and sends back a confirmation. So my entire transaction is now complete. Is there anything left to do? Well, yes. You have a success and failure handlers here on the client side, but generally they are not enough to ensure that the transaction is secure, because anyone with a debugger such as Firefox or Chrome developer tools can issue a success code and try to get your digital item for free. So because of that, there is another way to make sure that the transaction is secure, and that is to acknowledge the purchase notification on the server side. And that is done through a callback that Google sends you after the transaction is over. So on your server, where you prepare your JSON, you can also set up a postback handler that will receive the transaction notification from Google. And here I have an example. It is Python, but you can adapt it to Java or PHP. And it shows how simple it is to acknowledge the notification from Google. The notification comes back as a post, and it will be another JWT. You will decode it with your seller secret, make sure everything looks okay. And as I mentioned earlier, it will be the original transaction JWT plus an order ID. You will look at the JWT, make sure it's correct. You will get the order ID, and you will have to respond back to Google with the order ID to complete the payment. You will have 10 seconds to do that, which is more than enough in vast majority of cases. And once you respond with the order ID, the transaction will be complete. And then Google will call your client handlers. And in that case, you know that the transaction is secure, you have the money, and you can give the item to the customer. So it is always recommended that you use both types of handlers, the server-side handler and the client handler, to confirm the transaction and update your internal game or application state. And that's it. Very simple to use API. It took me probably less than 10 minutes to explain it. You can copy-paste the code from the slides, but best is if you go on our developer site and look at the samples page. We have examples in Java and Python, and you can take them and very easily adapt them to your special case. Now let's have a look at a slightly more complicated API, and that is the Instant Buy API. So first I want to go over a very important concept here. The Instant Buy API allows you to use your existing payment processor to complete a transaction. So the buy flow is slightly different. It's not an end-to-end buy flow like the Digital Goods API, where everything was done by Google. In this case, you will initiate the buy flow using the customer's wallet, but you will end up processing the transaction yourself. This is done using a proxy card. It is a one-time virtual card, a MasterCard branded card that Google will send you, and you can charge this only for this particular transaction. So in order to get that one-time card, you'll have to go through several steps. And the first step is to get what we call a must wallet. A must wallet contains must payment credentials that you can use in your application. And that is a must credit card number, so partial credit card number that you can display to the customer, and shipping information. You can use the shipping information to compute tax and shipping costs, and the must payment information can be used by the customer to select which card or which payment instrument they want to use for the transaction. So before you set up anything, you need to create a JWT, a JWT, like in the other cases, where you will communicate with Google the information you are requesting in the Mast wallet. Once you set up that information, you can create your shopping cart page where you'll have a Buy with Google page. And clicking that Buy with Google page will send your Mast wallet request to Google, and you'll receive back the Mast wallet information. So very important concept to notice here. You'll have to have that information ready before rendering the Buy with Google button. Now, rendering the Buy with Google button is also very simple. You can do it two ways, statically or dynamically. Statically, we have a special G:\wallet element that you can insert into your web page, or you can do it dynamically to JavaScript to a library function call. And note that in both cases, you have a request capability for that masked wallet information that will be passed on to Google once the customer clicks on the Buy with Google button. So at this point, you are all set up. You have created your Buy with Google button. You are requesting particular information about that customer, and that could be shipping address. If you are shipping a real good, you can skip the shipping address. If you're, let's say, just provide a digital service, and you will need to get back the partial credit card number, the masked credit card number, so that the customer selects and acknowledges that they want to pay with that particular instrument. So now once that information goes to Google, Google will send you back the Mast wallet, and in this case you will see it in visual form here. So now you have shipping information and you have a partial credit card number or more. The customer can use the change buttons to select different shipping addresses if they are available in their Google Wallet account, or different instruments, different credit cards, again, if they are available. Once the customer has settled on a particular shipping information and payment information, you can compute the exact shipping charges and tax and provide a total charge amount. In the case of a Mast wallet request, the charge amount was just an estimate. Generally, it would exclude shipping and tax because you don't know at that point what the tax or shipping charges are. So once you get in this state, you have a place order button where the customer confirms the purchase. Once that place order button is pressed, then you will request what we call a full wallet. A full wallet returns back to you the credit card information needed to actually charge the purchase. That will be the proxy card, the one-time use card, and you'll have all the information you need to actually process it with your preferred payments processor. So once we go to the full wallet, as I said, it has the exact amount that you need to charge. That includes tax and shipping. And all the details you go back include the billing address and the card number, which will allow you to make the exact charge. So this is very powerful, especially for merchants which have their own in-house payment processing, or they have a very customized and sophisticated post-transaction system or inventory system. In that case, the digital good solution probably was not enough. That's a very simple solution, and they would have had to build on top of it anyway. So in this way, merchants have access to a very powerful API, which gives them more control over the entire transaction flow. So with that, I think we covered all the important aspects of the two APIs. How do you get started? It's very easy. I pointed out the documentation earlier. I'm gonna say it again. It's at developers.google.com/commerce, where you will find separate documentation for the Digital Goods API and the Instant Buy API. With that, we have tutorials, we have sample code that you can very easily reuse. We have demo code, we have sandbox, where you can actually test your entire integration with test credit cards. So everything will look the same as in reality, as in a production environment, except that no money exchanges hands. The test credit cards will not involve a real transaction. You can create a merchant account also. We have steps how to do that from the documentation. And once you do that, you can start testing, you can start implementing, and you can start selling. And with that, you can start making money. And that's what we want everyone to do, to be happy and profit. And if you have questions, you have suggestions, we have links on our page to our blog, to our social media accounts, and we have regular sessions on Google Developers Live. We will see you then, and until then, bye.